Hey everyone, Father Anthony here, and I want to talk to you today about a really awesome book that I just reread for the first time in a while. He Leadeth Me by Father Walter Ciszek. So this past January, just a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go on a silent retreat down to Alabama. I went to the Shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament in Huntsville, Alabama. Gorgeous, gorgeous shrine. If you've never been, please go and visit as soon as possible. But so I went down there with another brother priest, and we were on silent retreat down there for about 4 days. We had to come home because, lo and behold, it was going to snow in Alabama of all places. So we had to come home, cut our retreat short a little bit. But while I was there, this is important backstory. I'm going to get to the book, but while I was there, I had this really awful cold. I had this just sickness that was just really annoying. I'd already been sick for 2 weeks by this point. A lot of people are kind of coming down with this crud that just does not want to go away. Well, I had that crud, and it was really annoying. It was just so upsetting that I didn't get to kind of rest in my silent retreat and just kind of have a quiet, peaceful experience. I was hacking up a lung. I was drowning in myself. It was horrible. It was Lord, please just deliver me from this suffering, please. And so of all books, I chose to read this one on this silent retreat. And let me tell you, it was deeply convicting. I had read this once before several years ago, and it was very influential and just impactful. Anyone who's read this book will say how incredible the story is. And if you don't know anything about this man, Father Walter Ciszek, Jesuit priest, he felt a calling from the Lord to go and serve as a priest in Russia. And this is during kind of the Soviet Russia era, the USSR era. And so he just felt a calling on his life to go and serve people and love them as a priest, but in this area that for a lot of people would be terrifying, it would be overwhelming. But he had this zeal, this desire, this intense he was convinced that this is what Jesus was asking him to do in his life, and so he prepared for serving in Russia, in Rome, and then when the time came, he was serving in a little parish kind of near Poland, towards the kind of when the Soviets were coming through and kind of taking over. He was serving in a Polish parish, and then he had the opportunity to go into Russia, and he had these extremely lofty expectations, right? He had these extremely high expectations of what ministry in Russia would look like. He had kind of imagined for so many years what his life would look like, and he was ready for it. He's like, Lord, this is what you want. This is what I want. I can't wait. So he jumped on the opportunity to go and serve in Russia when he had the chance. But things were not exactly as he imagined. It was very different, in fact. And he became kind of discouraged at first. He was kind of disappointed and just confused. Lord, I thought this is what you wanted me to do. I thought this is what you are leading me, right? He leadeth me. I thought this was what you were leading me to do, and this is nothing like what I expected. Because he got arrested at one point. He got arrested. This was kind of early on in his time in Russia. He got arrested, and so he's in this little prison cell. And as the book, if you pick this book up and read it, you'll find that he spent 4 years in solitary confinement, something like 20 years in a Siberian labor camp. This guy went through it. But this kind of initial experience of being thrown into a jail cell, I found this quote particularly convicting, and so I'll share it with you all. He says this: many men feel frustrated or disappointed or even defeated when they find themselves face to face with a situation or an evil they cannot do much about. Poverty, addiction, alcoholism, social injustice, racial discrimination, hatred and bitterness, war, corruption, and the oppressive bureaucracy of every institution, including the church, right? Okay, this is something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Okay, he says, all of that stuff can serve as a source of bitter frustration and a feeling sometimes of utter hopelessness. Wow, yeah, I mean, that right there describes so many people, right? It describes how I feel sometimes when I feel like I'm up against something, or I feel like there's some sort of insurmountable problem in the world, in the church, in politics, whatever. You can be left with this source of, that could be a real source of utter hopelessness, bitter frustration, kind of this resentment that life isn't the way it's supposed to be, right? That the world is not the way that it is supposed to be. And we become the arbiters of what should and should not be. We kind of dupe ourselves into believing that we get to decide what reality is. And that leads to so much frustration, right? That leads to so much anger and resentment and ultimately despair, because it is something that in its grand totality is beyond the scope of our control, okay? Like, this is all about control, right? We want to be able to control. We have these level of expectations, right? Father Walter Ciszek, he had a level of expectation of what ministry, of priestly ministry in Russia, what that would look like. And I think that's something that we all struggle with, isn't it, right? We all have expectations of what our life is supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like. And when it's not that way, we can be very tempted to feel like something's terribly wrong. Something didn't go right. We made some sort of mistake. We missed the memo somewhere along the line. And that leads us to bitterness, resentment, frustration, hopelessness. What does Father Walter Ciszek say here? So, but God does not expect a man single-handedly to change the world or overthrow all evil or cure all ills. He does expect him, though, to act as he would have him act in these circumstances ordained by his will and his providence. Nor will God's grace be lacking to help him act. That's it right there, right? Like, yeah, okay, so reality doesn't meet your expectations, right? You can't control everything, you can't fix everything, but God doesn't expect you to fix everything. Just like renounce that lie in the name of Jesus. Like, Jesus, in your name, in your holy and precious name, Jesus, I renounce the lie that I am expected to fix everything, to fix my family, to fix my country, to fix my soul, right? Everything, right? That's not what God's expecting you to do. But what God is expecting us to do is to act as he would have him act, to do God's will in the circumstances that you find yourself in. Okay? And that's really the heart of this entire book. This is the heart, this is the insight of Father Walter Ciszek, is that somehow in God's permissive will, in his providential design, that suffering does happen in this world. Like, I mean, Father Walter Ciszek got to share his story. Something that I was thinking about is like how many men and women were oppressed and destroyed and beat down and silenced by the communist regime in Russia that did not write a book, right? That had to endure those conditions and make peace and find meaning in their life and embrace God's will in the midst of those circumstances. You know, like, that's what we're expected to do. That's what we're called to do. And so, like, in a very small way, me personally, like when I was on this retreat, you know, okay, Lord, I'm sick right now. I have this cough. I'm like drowning in mucus. This is horrible. Like, why do I have to be like this, right? Like, it shouldn't be this way. I should be able to have peace on my silent retreat. I should be able to pray without coughing and sputtering and all the things and taking medicine. No, like, God expects me to embrace his will in the midst of what is actually going on, to embrace reality and obey God in the midst of it. Like, right? Like to accept and embrace that which we can't change right here and now, but finding God's will in the midst of the circumstances that we are in fact in. Okay? And this is not like passive, like acquiescence to evil. It's actually the power of the gospel. It actually is the scandal of the cross, if you really think about it. You know, and so whatever suffering you're going through, it is not meaningless. It's not empty. It's not void. And you can do God's will in the midst of it. That is the grace that he's absolutely giving you right now. And I'm convinced of it. I know that that's what's going on. I trust the Lord. I trust that he is going to give you the grace that you need to get through and to not just endure, but actually like become a saint and thrive and flourish in your circumstances. That's the cross, right? That is because Jesus on the cross is suffering, but he is flourishing, right? Like that's a tough word, isn't it? That's a real tough word. Jesus on the cross is suffering. He is emptying himself. I mean, he's abandoned, right? By everyone, like except for his mother and St. John the Evangelist and Mary Magdalene. Everyone else hates him at the foot of the cross, except for those guys, really. And yet, Jesus is flourishing because he is not alone, because he's with the Father, right? He loves the Father, and the Father is in him, and he is in the Father. God's grace will not be lacking to help us act in our circumstances. So, I just want to encourage you, wherever you're at, to embrace God's will. And if you haven't read it already, pick this awesome book up. God bless you, and thanks for watching. Subscribe, like this video, and we'll see you next time.